Hello, folks. Uh, this is kind of an impromptu video, and so I apologize for any ambient noise that may be there. I'm trying to respond to this one video that I've seen on somebody else's channel because I kind of want to make a few points that I don't think I have made before. Well, I have seen some clips from it in the video that I was watching, that was responding to this video. I haven't watched this whole thing in full yet. And while I'm going to try to give my unscripted response to it, chances are I'm probably gonna cut out a few parts that I think that are either irrelevant or just fluff, or that I simply have no answer to. I'll be leaving a link in the description so you can watch it in full context if you would like.
So the big yet irrelevant and pointless question, does God exist? And I find this question to be somewhat hypocritical.
How can this question be hypocritical? I mean, yeah, okay, I know that further ahead you're gonna actually explain that the logic we use to answer this question is hypocritical, but the question itself cannot be hypocritical. I mean, it's literally a yes or no answer.
Because disproving the existence of God comes from the same logic as disproving the existence of man.
Can we see man? Yes. Can we see God? No. Problem solved.
Now, if someone came to you and tried to convince you that they don't exist, they said, I'm actually on Mars, and I have these Martians that have plugged me into the Matrix, or they have these probes in my head, and they're making me think all of these crazy things. What do you think of this guy?
I would say, do you have any evidence? Can you present some kind of glitch in the reality that would show us that reality that we think of is actually fabricated?
This guy needs to seek some medical help. He needs to go to the loony bin, whatever it may be. You have to stay away from the guy. So why don't we think the same way when someone questions the existence of God?
You kind of got it the wrong way around. I mean, we basically have no evidence of God's existence. So if anything, if we follow the same logic, we would be throwing people who do claim that God does exist into the loony bin because we have no evidence to prove that God exists, and he would likewise have no evidence that he is on Mars. He's making a claim positive, he needs to provide the evidence for it. And if he doesn't provide it, well, then he lost the argument. You're making the proof positive that God exists, so where's your evidence? I mean, if he wants to make this assertion about reality that he cannot back up with things that we can actually observe, confirm, contest, and contemplate, then what the hell is he doing here? I mean, what evidence do you have that Allah exists?
Now, people attempt to prove their own existence by something called empiricism. And that is by the belief that senses are like an absolute truth. So if you can see it, you can hear it, touch it, smell it, hear it, all of these sort of things, taste it, it exists. So they say, I can see, I can hear, therefore I exist. But what about your dreams? I mean, in a dream, can't you see, hear, sometimes taste? Or what about when someone's in the desert and they have a hallucination? If they're incredibly thirsty and it's very, very hot, they begin to see these streams of water. Does the water actually exist?
Well, there are a few options. For one, the water could actually exist, or the water could exist and just be a little bit further, which is the phenomenon that we know as optical illusions. The water could be the hallucination of his mind, or the water can be a divine inspired vision. I mean, if we're assuming God exists, and why not?
Did the dream actually take place? Obviously not. We don't need to sit there questioning it. So if you're going to attempt to prove your existence by empiricism, by the senses, then you have to either now say that the dreams or that the hallucinations actually took place and was actually existent, or that dreams didn't actually take place and the hallucination wasn't actually existent, the water that is, and so therefore you can't be using senses to prove your existence because you'd find yourself contradicting yourself.
Alright, even if you're absolutely correct, and I can't say that you're not because I'm too lazy to actually think this over, what we usually use to guide ourselves in the real world is called science. In science, empiricism is basing everything on evidence. Everything can be tested. And while you could still make the argument that not all of our senses are going to be 100% accurate, and even if we observe that a machine that we designed to test something is giving us result X, Y, and Z, there is still some very minor margin of error. However, this is why we have so many eyes looking at it. I mean, for all we know, we have 10 billion people looking at one piece of paper that says God not real. And if that's the case, if so many people claim that this paper says God not real, then the chances of that paper saying God real are incredibly small, which is why science keeps constantly contesting itself, which is why we keep trying to contest these results, to make the possibility of them being false as small as possibly possible.
Now there's many philosophers who have spent, for the most part, the majority of their lives attempting to prove the existence of man. And for the most part, they cannot do so. The most logical answer that they've come towards proving the existence of man is the quote by René Descartes in his book, The Meditations, where he says, "I think, therefore I am." Now let me tell you the contradiction in this statement. If you know anything about the world of mathematics and proof by induction, attempting to prove something, for example the existence in this case, it's a complete no-no to begin with an assumption that you already exist. I'll tell you what I mean. I think, therefore I am. You've begun the statement with I. I assumes existence. So you cannot prove existence whilst also assuming that you exist. It's contradictory.
Okay, first of all, that's mathematics. I thought we were discussing philosophy. And as for the assumption that we exist, well, I mean, we kinda have to. I mean, let's assume the opposite, since we don't know the answer. What if we don't exist? If we don't exist, then we don't fucking exist! I mean, literally, everything we do is just a figment of our or some giant computer's imagination. Nothing we do has any quote-unquote real-world consequences, since we don't exist. If our entire lives are just some cosmic brain fart, then why are we even bothering questioning anything? Why are we bothering following any rules? I mean, what if we don't exist and there is no God to make us exist? What if we don't exist and there is no life after death? What if we don't exist and there is no Jehovah, Yahweh, Allah, anything to worship? If we don't exist, nothing has any kind of a point. Which is why we have to assume that we exist, otherwise the whole conversation goes nowhere else.
Now, does that mean that we don't exist? Does that mean that you, your mother, father, brother, sister, don't exist? Of course not. Of course you exist. I exist. We exist.
You literally just assumed that we exist.
But we don't need to spend any time into these completely trivial matters.
Then why are you wasting your time making a video about these completely trivial matters?
Because it's not logical to do so.
I swear to God I didn't set this up. Oh wait, I don't believe in God. What I just said is completely worthless.
Because it's not logical to spend any time into these completely trivial matters. It's self-evident that me and you and him and her, they exist.
And based on what standard of evidence? I mean, could we be empirical evidence of your own senses that you can smell and taste and see other people? What was that you had to say about empiricism again?
Now, you probably didn't even question your own existence.
Does that mean that we don't exist? Does that mean that you, your mother, father, brother, sister, don't exist? Of course not.
Until this video. And if you did beforehand, you probably just would have tried to just get rid of it like that. Just thought it's a stupid thought.
What if we don't exist? If we don't exist, then we don't fucking exist! I mean, literally,
everything we do is just a figment of our or some giant computer's imagination. And nothing we do has any quote-unquote real-world consequences since we don't exist. Our entire lives are just some cosmic brain fart.
And the reason for that is because it's illogical. And the same thing would have happened for the existence of God if you didn't get affected by this disease of atheism.
I'm sorry, what?
And so why don't you question your own existence?
Because as far as I know, I exist.
And why do you question the existence of God?
Because as far as I know, God doesn't exist. And these are both, by the way, based on the same thing. Evidence. I can tell that I exist because I can feel myself, and if I punched my brother in the face, he would be able to tell that I punched him in the face. But I can't say that God exists. I mean, I've never heard God, I've never seen God, I never smelled God, and I never tasted God. And even before anyone on Netflix suggests that I suck their dick because they play a God character so that I may taste God, fuck off. And I never touched God. I never had God miraculously restore my balance in the middle of walking on a tightrope. I've never seen God write in the sky, "I am God, surrender to me now, maggots, or I will fucking bombard your entire cities to the ground until there is nothing left of your pitiful little planet." I've seen no miracles where somebody who was about to die suddenly gets a white aura around them and becomes fully healthy. I mean, seriously, what the fuck do you expect from me?
Now, the only way that anything makes sense, and I'll wrap up with this, the only way that anything makes sense is through the belief that you, the viewer of this video, exist. And if you take that belief away, then anything ceases to have any value or meaning.
And that includes God! Come on, you're so close, take one step further!
Now, similarly, the only way that anything has any value or meaning is through the existence of God.
No. The only way anything would have any value or meaning to humans is if humans existed. And the only way anything would have any value or meaning to God is if God exists. And on the giant grand cosmic scale that anything has any value or meaning, period, to anything, anyone, anywhere, any why, is if anything, anywhere, any when, any why existed. I mean, from what you just said here, it kind of sounds like you assumed that without God, there is no meaning for absolutely anything, and you require some grand sky daddy wizard to guide you through life instead of forging your own path ahead. It's like you require there to be some kind of higher being in existence for you to accept your own agency. Seriously, man, look, you had the willpower to create this video to convince us that God exists. If you could put that kind of intent and resources into anything, period, even the thing that you're actually doing, then it wouldn't matter if God exists. I mean, you're still passionate. You're still enacting something. You're still trying to find a meaning in your life. You're still driving to some goal. It doesn't need to be powered by God. I mean, why don't you realize that? Why can't you try to have, I don't know, even your own selfish benefit to motivate you? Why not that? Why not the greater good of humanity? Why not the not as grand good of your own hometown? Why does there have to be some kind of out-of-universe God that you have to aspire to in order to have any motivation to do anything? Your video is titled, "What Atheists Don't Want You to Hear," but I just heard you, I just listened to you, and I've heard you. I've considered the words you have to say, and honestly, it kind of looks like you're the one afraid of something. Like you're the one who doesn't want to hear that God doesn't exist. Because if God does exist, then okay, my life hasn't changed even the slightest bit. But if God doesn't exist, then your entire life is pointless. I am driven by passion, man. Don't let fear drive you. Oh, your video is almost over and I wanted to cut some parts out, but it just keeps going on. Alright, what else do you have to say?
And if you take that belief away, then absolutely everything and anything becomes completely irrelevant and meaningless.
Actually, I would argue the opposite. If God does exist, then your life is pointless and meaningless. Because if you're doing something wrong, then God could just, at his whim, undo your entire life's work. He could, just for the lulz, wipe you off the face of the planet and then send you to hell forever because you did something he didn't like. Your agency, what you want, is completely irrelevant because you are just a cosmic plaything of this deity that rules over your life. If God exists, he would be the Red Alert 3 commander who is sending wave of conscripts to battle just for his own fun. And you, the human, would be one of those soldiers who is ordered to run straight into the fire. God knows you are going to die. But God just doesn't give a single fucking shit about you. You are a pawn in his cosmic plaything game.
You've got two options. You either believe that God exists, and as a result of that, of course, man would exist, or you question your own existence. Now, which one for you is more logical?
What about option 3? God exists, but you don't. What if God made you hallucinate everything? What if God is the only real thing and man isn't? I mean, you kind of left that out. From all these 3 choices, I would honestly prefer option 2, because then I would at least have the option to believe that I matter to someone, to something, and that I can make a change in the world that won't be immediately reversed by God. And if the price of that is considering the option that everything I do is a hallucination and nothing I do matters, period, then I am willing to pay that price.